The Life of the Shaykh Abu al-Hasan al-Shadhili. The biography of the founder of the Shadhiliya Tariqa according to the Hagiograph. Sources concerns itself with the two areas of Morocco, Maghrib al-Aqsa, and Tunisia, Ifriqiya, and later with Egypt. All of these sources appear to stem from two hagiographic efforts on the life of the Sheikh Ali ibn Abd Allah ibn Abd al-Shaykh Abu al-Hasan al-Shadhili. The earlier account, written by the man usually considered the second successor to al-Shadhili himself, is the more widely known. The author Ibn Atta al-Iskandari, who died in 1309, can also be considered the primary systematizer of the Tariqa because in addition to his hagiographic effort on al-Shadhili entitled Lata'if al-Minan, the Book of the Divine Blessings Degrees, he penned such notable works as Miftah al-Falah, The Key to Success Registered, and Al-Ghas al-Mujarrad, The Pure Goal. But Ibn Atta al-Law's recognition as a writer extends beyond the Shadhiliya and is due to his famous Kitab al-Hikam, the Book of Wisdom registered known throughout the Muslim world. The second account of the Shaykh's life was written around 1320 by a comparatively inconspicuous devotee of the Tariqa, Abu al-Qasim al-Himyari, more often known as Ibn al-Sabag. He undertook this project within a century of al-Shadhili's death 1258, interviewing a number of members of his immediate family and authorities within the Brotherhood. The title of this work is Durat al-Asrar wa Tufat al-Abrar, the Pearl of Secrets and the Gift of the Pious. Degrees. Although these two histories follow the same general line with regard to the Shaykh's life, they often differ on details. Ibn al-Sabag and Ibn Atta Allah both give their subject's birthplace as the tribal region of Gumera in Morocco south of Ceuta, but from the first the date may be calculated at around 1187, while the second is silent. On the subject, the early religious history of Gumera included fairly widespread Kharijite affinities and a great many religious pretenders, one of whom was responsible for the assassination of al-Shadhili's most famous teacher Ibn Mashdi, 1225-2. This teacher, who had ties to the great Spanish mystic Abu Madian d. 1198, had established himself in a zar at Zawia on Jabal Alam. It is there that al-Shadhili made contact with him, but only after having gone through what one scholar describes as a spiritual crisis * which sent him on a search for the gut of the age. This search took him to Iraq, where he was told while searching for the prominent Sufi figure al-Wasiti d. 1234 to return to the Maghrib, where he would find who he was looking for. According to al-Shadhili, this was Ibn Mashish. Degrees. None of the sources specifies how long al-Shadhili spent at the Zar at Zawia of Ibn Mash upon his return, but it was long enough for the master to recognize the maturity attained by the pupil. Ibn Mash then sent the student out on his own, specifically to Ifriqiya. There al-Shadhili took to performing miracles, karamat, and living as an ascetic. Despite being at this period a vagabond ascetic * he became associated with the village of Shadhila some distance south of Tunis because of his practice of retreating into the nearby cave on Jabal Zagwan. Having attracted a substantial following, the Sheikh moved to Tunis. According to Elmer H. Dubas, this happened in 1228, the same year that Abu Zakaria Hafsid, still nominally under the Almohads, came to power. During his rule, Abu Zakaria built the first madrasa in Tunis and established an important library, contributing substantially to religious education in the city. As he had done on Jabal Zagwan, al-Shadhili continued his practice of retreating to a cave for meditation and religious discipline Kolwa, and in Tunis he chose the mountain and cave located in the Jalaz cemetery. It was on this site later that the Shadhili's area would be built. But al-Shadhili's stay in Tunis would not be permanent. Ibn al-Sabak tells us that the local Fuqaha jurists rallied against him and that he stood accused of being a Fatimid agent. In the face of this persecution, he eventually set out for Egypt. Fal. Ibn Atta. However, the date of his departure can be calculated as 1252 *, though he is silent on the subject of the persecution of the Sheikh. One modern scholar, while investigating this discrepancy, has produced evidence that casts serious doubt on the historical validity of any persecution. Whatever the circumstances, al-Shadhili was moving into a new stage of his career. In Egypt, his home became Alexandria, where he set up a Zawia, attracted more followers, and laid the basis for his new Tariqa. A. Mohammed Makin concludes from this development that the real birthplace of the Shadhili was certainly Egypt. Here it grew into a self-conscious body with a definite step toward theoretical expansion. This theoretical expansion would be undertaken by the great minds of the order such as Abu al-Abbas al-Sidi, 1287, the first successor Khalifa to al-Shadhili ibn Otter, Ahmadi, 1309 and others. The major events of the Shaykh's life are agreed upon not only by Ibn Sabog and Ibn Otter, Allah, but also by most subsequent hagiographers. Degrees it is therefore interesting to note that the short introduction to the Azab and Waza-Ifa prayer collection, used by the Shadhili in Tunis today, entitled Nibada's Alakia Degrees wa Dalal Alakia, gives a biographical sketch of the saint that presents him much more as a local son. A notable statement in the Nibras al-Lachiat is the claim that al-Shadhili came to Tunisia at the age of 10. This scenario goes beyond the Maghrib-oriented Durat al-Asrar in setting al-Shadhili more firmly in his Tunisian milieu and playing down his Moroccan birthplace. Even the mention of his Moroccan spiritual master, Ibn Shish, is minimized while his ties to Tunisian teachers are emphasized. The following statement occurs in the first 3 pages. Tunis boasts that it embraced the Imam of the spiritual path, the Qutb of the earth, the companion of the path and the truth, Shaykh Abu al-Hasan Ali al-Shadhili, while he was in his youth. It was responsible for the stages of his learning, and it was ordained by God that in its places of worship and institutions he would be granted both the penetration of the secret of unity and the wearing of the mantle burda of Sufism. IN 602-1206 he arrived from Guimara, Morocco, being 10 years old since he was born. In 593-1196, he became the student of Tunisian sheikhs such as Abu Sa'id al-Baji d. 1156, and Abu Abd Allah bin Harizm d. 1235, and he left Tunisia when he was 20 years old. During the year 613-1216, entering the lands of the East to study the science of Shari-Sa and Hadra, and joining up with such knowledgeable people as Abu Fath al-Sidi and Ibn Abd al-Salam Mashish. Then he returned to Tunis to propagate his tariqah, and did not leave until the year 642-1244, owing to Egypt, where he died in 654-1258. According to the chronology of the Nibids, al-Akia al-Shadhili spent his first 10 years in Morocco, 38 in Tunisia, except for a voyage to the east. His return to Guimara is only implied by the name Ibn Abd al-Salam, and his final 14 in Egypt. No other hagiographical source, according to my research, contains such extensive dating or emphasis on the saint's Tunisian education. In light of the early hagiographies previously cited, we may conclude that the Nibras al-Atiyah degrees reflects a local tradition that presents al-Shadhili as rather more Tunisian. This local tradition, with which we may associate the Durat al-Sada, includes miracle stories of some of the saint's Tunisian companions. Degrees the historical value of this tradition has yet to be fully studied. A distinction worth highlighting is that the Shadhili in Tunis is a tariqah, but that Sufi are not necessarily attached to any particular locale, for various branches of one order use a number of separate locations in larger cities. On the other hand, Zawia is a location. As mentioned earlier, it is a place of worship that usually includes the grave of a saint. The Shadhili in Tunis represents a somewhat unusual situation in that it is a brotherhood centered on a Zawia that was built over a site made holy by the founder of the tariqah, but which does not include his grave. The site is the cave Magdri used by al-Shadhili as a place of spiritual retreat during his time in Tunis. The Zawia located in the Great Jalaz Cemetery is called simply Sidi Belhasan. This Zawia consists principally of a lower mosque built over the cave and an upper mosque some 70 meters away, built on the location of one of al-Shadhili's visions of Muhammad. In this vision, the Prophet promised he would visit the Hadra registered at this site one Thursday each summer in the second half of the night. It is for this reason that the upper mosque was built at this location and is open for only the 14 weeks of the summer during the entire year. Degrees the Zawia serves as a meeting place for the brotherhood. It is there on Fridays after the evening prayer Saldat al-Maghrib that the Quran is read and the prayers Azab of al-Shadhili are recited collectively by the members. Essentially the same thing happens on the summertime Thursdays, although a small Dhikr ceremony of few dozen men is added, which lasts for most of the rest of the night. A larger Dhikr is also held on Saturday mornings. Throughout the year in the lower mosque in 1991 I counted roughly 140 men and children and 70 women outside. The Zawia is also a sacred site for many people who are in no way affiliated with the Tariqa. The cave and the site of al-Shadhili's vision are accessible to the public only at certain times, but most of the Zaw at Weir and, in particular its two wells, are readily open to visitors when their presence does not interfere with the activities of the Brotherhood. Although the term Zawia, literally a corner, for the most part signifies a place, it can take on a somewhat different meaning. As an institution, a Zawia may be simply the manifestation of an extended family that has acquired some form of religious significance, usually described as having barakah. Among the mountain settlers in northwestern Africa, Ernest Chelner distinguishes this type of institution and contrasts it with its form in more populated areas. He writes, the Zaw at Weir in a tribe is a kin group, but in the city, although it may have a kin-defined nucleus, it is essentially a religious club recruited by enthusiasm or religious interest and defined not by kinship but by specialized ritual practices. The Zawia of Sidi Belhasan certainly conforms to the latter model. Sidi Belhasan in the modern era of the Republic of Tunisia ESD 1956 has been one of the very few Sufi institutions to receive government support. The Zawia itself is for the most part maintained by money from the national and city governments. There are probably two reasons for this favor. The first is that the Shadhili is the most conservative and moderate Tariqa in Tunis, thereby making it a safe institution to support for a government that is often popularly seen as being un-Islamic. A second and probably more important reason is the long history of affiliation of much of the religious elite of Tunis with the Tariqa. A large part of the conservative attraction of the Shadhili in Tunis is the perception, fully supported by the Brotherhood itself, that it is not the product of a subdivision Ifa of the original Tariqa of al-Shadhili. A part of its legitimacy is based on its claim to function in strict accordance with the rule laid down by the founder. In fact, the present Sheikh of the Zawia, simultaneously the head of the Brotherhood in Tunis, Hassan Belhasan, made it clear to me that Sidi Belhasan is not a mara but a site of saint veneration, saying on Ana pas le culte des saints Isai. This claim that the Zawia is free of the cult of the saint underlines the conservative nature of the Tariqa. Although the Zawia and the Tariqa are officially supported, they continue to maintain the functions that serve the religious needs of the population at large. The concepts of barakah, healing, saintly intercession, and so on are current in varying degrees among both the brothers Ikhwan of the Tariqa and the unaffiliated visitors. The importance of the saint in Sufi tradition is undeniable, although opinions vary on its origins and orthodoxy. Ignace Goldziher saw the cult of the saint as a pre-Islamic survival against which the enlightened preach *4, whereas Daniel Provençal claimed that Islamic saints simply took the place of earlier legendary heroes, Mediterranean gods, witches, and Jenny's degrees. But no matter what its origins, the idea of the wali, the holy man, and the protege of God is fully part of the Islamic religious worldview. Degrees. An important component of this subject is the role played by the descendants of the Prophet Sayyid Sharif al-Bayt. These individuals have always been revered in one way or another throughout the Islamic world and in North Africa. This descent became associated with claims to barakah. In a recent article, Valerie J. Hoffman-Ladd discusses the reverence for the al-Bayt in modern Egyptian Sufism. Registered. Chelner also discusses the rise of Sharif families in his study of the mountain settlers of Morocco and Algeria. He describes this religious authority once established as charisma routinized by kinship. In the case of al-Shadhili, its prestige is secured by a claim to Alid descent. The barakah attributed to the Zawia, to the Tariqa, and to the Sheikh are crucial elements in the legitimacy and religious significance of the Shadhiliya. The Zawia is a holy site due primarily to its position over al-Shadhili's cave. According to Provençal, the sacred sites in popular North African Islam achieved their status long ago, with the sanctity of earlier animist sites, for example trees, streams, caves, being incorporated into popular Islamic practice through association with a local saint. Even restricting ourselves to the Islamic tradition, the image of the cave is well known and weighted with significance. The Quran relates the story of the companions of the cave and narrates the shelter found by Muhammad and Abu Bakr in the cave of Thawr. Quran 18:9-940. But doubtless the most important cave in Islamic religious history is that of Hira, where according to Hadith literature Muhammad received his first revelation. The stories of the Prophet retreating from the busy world to a cave for spiritual reflection Kolwa are in form echoed by the hagiographies of al-Shadhili. It should not be surprising therefore to hear in popular Tunisian law concerning the Magdara of Sidi Belhasan that the Prophet Moses had used the same cave for his Kolwa. The Baraka status of the Sidi Belhasan Zar at Wiyah is reinforced by the activities of the Brotherhood. During the Dhikr and his recitations on Saturday mornings, many women gather in the antechamber not to participate in the recitations but to benefit by their mere proximity to the Hadra. Although the women cannot view the proceedings, they can easily hear the goings-on. They often break into a ululating chorus and, on occasion, one or more women will produce ecstatic trance-like calls. The Shadhili order has an unusual relationship with the Zawia of Sidi Meres Abu Muhammad Maraz al-Siddiqi, 1022, located in the old Medina of Tunis, which is not home to any Iftarika or Tafa. A group from the Shadhili gathers at this tomb shrine every Wednesday morning to recite Azab and to perform a short Dhikr. The reason given for this is that al-Shadhili, when he first entered Tunis, went to the grave of Sidi Meres to read and recite prayers. It is in honor of this that the Hadra gathers there. It is interesting to note that Sidi Meres is the patron saint of Tunis and in fact was not primarily a religious figure. Rather, he was known for his charity and defense of the Jewish minority of the city. The association of the Shadhili with Sidi Meres serves both to raise the status of the tomb shrine to that of an active Zidi at Wiyah and to reinforce the civic prestige of the Shadhili order. The specific reasons individuals visit shrines and the Zawia of Sidi Belhasan are many, but the common factor is the search for help, be it spiritual or practical. Those who are not initiated into the Tariqa but attend one or more parts of the Hadra can be divided into two groups. The first consists of those who attend in an effort to secure some saintly intercession in a crisis in their lives. 47. The second is made up of those whose attendance is more regular and who are familiar with the azab of the Brotherhood. These individuals would find their association with the Tariqa spiritual ally beneficial in a wider sense than those of the first group who attend only in times of crisis. Practical help is invoked by such activities as placing the sick in the same room as the Hadra, praying for help in or near the Magdra, and making personal contact with the Shaykh to benefit from his baraka and his advice. The sanctity of the rule of the Tariqa and the baraka of the Shaykh are the two primary supports upon which the Shadhili stands. The first, sanctity of rule, means in practice the preservation and perpetuation of the adab, decorum or discipline, the azab, recitation, the dhikr and discipline, which together provide the essential structure of religious mystery for the Brotherhood. The importance of the preservation of the rule and teachings of the Tariqa is clear in an Aidza authorization issued to a Kadam sectional leader of a Brotherhood in Algeria at the turn of the century. And the Shadhili Sheikh Sidi Abu al-Qasim ibn Sa'id wants that anyone who alters or distorts what he has been taught will be taken to task for it in the hereafter. He who has changed or altered our doctrine will face judgment. For following the established techniques of these activities is considered essential for a successful Hadra, that is, a meaningful religious experience. For the members of the Shadhili of Sidi Belhasan, the murid/murshid registered relationship existing between them and their sheikh has not the same importance as it does in other brotherhoods or as it did in the earliest Sufi organizations. Rather than subject themselves to vigorous spiritual training, most individuals slowly improve themselves spiritually through regular attendance and participation in the Quran and his recitations, the Dhikr ceremonies, the Hadith readings and the lectures and sermons, all of which make up the ritual and tradition of the Shadhili rule. According to my research, this rule does not systematically consist of any specific mystical teachings. Rather, its sanctity and mystical efficacy are to be found through proper participation. Al-Shadhili himself pointed out that the light, which is the goal of spiritual discipline and devotion, is the product of al-amal al-asdilikor, spiritual practice. He also stressed the importance of keeping company with virtuous brethren or a proven sheikh. Registered higher spiritual development, which often includes study of the great Sufi think such as Ibn Arabi d. 1240 and al-Ghazali d. 1111 is dependent on the aptitude and motivation of the individual. Few in fact aspire to this level. Although the higher works of Islamic spirituality play a minor role in the practical sanctity of the tariqah, it must be remembered that they do form the intellectual backbone or the theory of Sufism's more practical and mundane manifestations, such as the rule of the tariqah. This can be seen in the many quotations of the great early Sufi thinkers. In the works specific to the Shadhiliya, in some the sanctity of the tariqah may accommodate a continuum of interests from that of the simple baraka seeker to that of the advanced mystical adept. On the practical level also, participation is left up to the individual's degree of personal commitment. The taking of a wazifa regimen of daily prayer recitations is uncommon today among the Shadhiliya of Tunis. An important member of a brotherhood states the following. Usually Shadhilites do not have any particular wazifa, each chooses one or has one recommended to him by his sheikh, which he does in accordance with the degree of spirituality he has reached. Nevertheless, the true murids of the tariqah, who are unfortunately few these days, adopt the following. After Salat al-Fajr they pray such and such. After Salat al-Subh, such and such. After Salat al-Asr they recite 11 times Sarat al-Ikhlas, once Surat al-Nas, once Surat al-Falaq, 7 times al-Fatiha, once Hizb al-Ba, one Hizb of the Quran. After Salat al-Isha they recite such and such. This statement points to the fact that of the many active members of the order only a few fully take up their spiritual discipline. In discussing the baraka of the sheikh, it must be noted that the theory was fully developed early in the history of the tariqah. In the writings of Ibn Atta, d. 1309, the second successor to the head of the tariqah, it is reported that al-Shadhili is incarnated in each succeeding sheikh of the tariqah. Degrees John Renard, in his study of Ibn Abbad of Ronda d. 1390, claims that a prevalent Shadhili theory in the late 14th century was that the Qutb is incarnated in each succeeding sheikh. In Sufi theory, the Qutb is the head of the spiritual fellowship of saints, and the power of intercession is generally attributed to him. The details of the theory of the Qutb vary widely according to time, place, and writer. In fact, the current position among the Ikhwan of Sidi Belhasan is that although in popular practice al-Shadhili is often prayed to for intercession, this is not within his prerogative. Rather, the power of intercession lies only with an earlier saint, Abd al-Qadir al-Jilani d. 1166. The present Sheikh of Sidi Belhasan, Hassan Belhasan, although serving as a focus for divine grace, is not actually descended from al-Shadhili. According to the accounts of the members of the Brotherhood, around 1,800, a member of the al-Mudib family, who was the imam at a nearby mosque, came to be appointed to the position of Sheikh of the tariqah in Tunis. All the subsequent sheikhs have come from this family, which through such a long association with the Zawia and the tariqah eventually became known as Belhasan. Octave de Pont and Zawia Kapol Lani in 1897 noted that of the 3 Shadhiliyas at Yd in Tunis at that time, the most important was that run by Ben Hassan, imam of the Mosque of Jena Babel, Jazira. Plus, although the choice of successor still rests ultimately with the government now, as it did under both French and Turkish rule, the appointment is made according to a consensus reached by the leading figures of the Brotherhood. The organization of the personnel under Sheikh Belhasan is compared by the members of the tariqah to a military command. Those under the sheikh are appointed by him to their various positions of responsibility, such as Sheikh al-Salat, Sheikh al-Qawar degrees Agn, Sheikh al-Dhikr, and Sheikh al-Azab. These individuals are responsible for leading their respective parts of the liturgy. A number of less important positions also exist, many of which have no liturgical significance. The hierarchy is reflected in the seating order during the recitation of the Azab and the ritual eating of common meals. Here the sheikh sits directly in front of a mihrab, facing away from it with his closest lieutenants to his left and right, and across from him in the opposing line. A man retains his position in the hierarchy of the Brotherhood even if he is absent. It was related to me by the sheikh that even if a man is not seen for many years, he may return to assume his place, and that the others must make room for him. In contrast, the inalienable right does not exist in the Hamidiyya Shadhiliyya of Egypt, who see any long absence from the Hadra as nailing a lapse in membership in the tariqah. Degrees It is also interesting to note that the rank-and-file members of Sidi Belhasan are not subject to the same detailed rule of conduct as those of the Hamidiyya Shadhiliya *, nor are they categorized in the elaborate fashion of other Egyptian Shadhili Turab. 8. Their only prescribed duties are the memorization to the best of their ability of the azab and regular presence at the gatherings of the Brotherhood. At Sidi Belhasan, the ceremony of initiation follows a pattern common among many F-Shiruk. The sheikh, surrounded by a number of followers, places his hands on the sitting or kneel-ing applicant, and together they recite the Fatiha. Degrees. Forms of prayer. As the activities of the Brotherhood center on prayer, the forms used warrant further elucidation. Although many of the terms and titles to be discussed have a number of meanings, the emphasis will be on the terms as far as they represent different types of written prayer. Of paramount importance to Islamic prayer in general is the Salat pl Salawat. This is the central prayer rite and is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. Each of the 5 daily occasions of this rite is to be preceded by a ritual ablution wudu and may take place anywhere except at tombs and unclean places. Degrees. The prayers specific to the Furug often revolve around the daily Salat times for a number of reasons, the most important of which is probably to share in the ritual cleanness of the wudu. Degrees. Many of the prayers are even assigned to follow a particular Salat prayer. For example, al-Shadhili is recorded as saying that the best time to recite his al-Bar is after Salat al-Sub morning prayer. As for the prohibition of prayer at tombs, the Zawia of Sidi Belhasan in Tunis, despite the presence of graves within and around its 2 main buildings, maintains its status as a place of Salat. In fact, the buildings are distinguished, at least in conversation, as the upper and lower mosques. The graves are located in rooms separate from those used for the 5 daily prayers. The word Salat and its plural, Salat, are also to be found as titles of prayers of supplication. In the collection Manba al-Sa. Registered 2 examples are Salawat Sidi Ahmad al-Badawidi 1276 and al-Salat al-Azimiyya. These prayers, not unlike others in the collection, are primarily concerned with invocations of blessing and requests for divine help. Another term, degrees, is also important in this context. Its root meaning is to call, and with the preposition /I it takes on the connotation of invoking blessing upon someone or something. Dua PLID may be translated as call, supplication, prayer, and request, but in usage a general distinction may be made between dua as a more personalized petition and salat as the fixed ritual duty of an individual as a member of the Islamic community. The topic of degrees that holds an important place in the Shadhili manuals. The modern Tariqa writer Abd al-Halim Muhammad d. 1977 highlights its importance with the hadiths. There is nothing more perfect towards God than the degrees at tilde, and for him to whom the door of dua is open, the doors of God's compassion are also open. Registered discussion is further made concerning strategies for maximizing the efficacy of one's degrees. Muhammad writes, the du'at is proper at all times, but the best time for du'at is in the last third of the night. He also relates the hadith that the slave is closest to his Lord when praying sajid, so increase your du'a, to which he adds, the places best suited for the answering of one's du'at are the pure and blessed places, the most notable of which are Mecca and Medina. Registered, and Shadhili himself says if you want him to answer your prayer in less than the blink of an eye, you must do 5 things. 1. Obey the divine command. 2. Avoid that which is forbid. Then 3. Purify the heart. 4. Show determination. And 5. Perform that which is required of you. Degrees * also degrees. A degrees holds a significant place in Islamic practice generally. We are told that because of the great importance of Dhikr and du'at degrees in Islam, Abu al-Hasan al-Shadhili was exhaustive in his performance of Dhikr and degrees. Registered. The term du'at is also a prayer title. In Manba al-Sadat one finds a pair of short prayers, degrees al-Basmala 1 al-Jalani and da al-Jalalahu attributed to Abd al-Qadir al-Jilani. In the same collection are found a number of shorter adiyah intended for use at special times such as the first day of the year and the day of Ashura. Turning from da to dhikr, literally mention or remembrance, we approach a more complex term. The significance of the ritual practice of dhikr remembrance of God, its techniques and its results will be dealt with later. Here I shall restrict our discussion of dhikr to its use in the context of prayer terminology. Dhikr can be seen to have three distinct meanings. The first is a usage that is tied closely to the verbal root of the term. In al-Madrasa al-Shadhili UP 140 we find the short statement, no one reaches God except through perseverance dawam in Dhikr. Here the meaning may be taken simply as remembrance of God or as referring to prayer in general. The verb used in its fifth form tadhakara is used to convey the idea of a sinner acknowledging his own sin. Exclamation. The second usage of dhikr is as a short formula. Some formulas are recited after one or more of the salat prayers, while others are used more generally. Al-Shadhili himself recommended the recitation of the following well-known dhikr formula. Saya, alhamdulillah la wa astaghfiru Allah wa one a hala wa one a kiwata illa billah. Knowing the special dhikr phrases of one's sheikh is vital. Ibn Ayyad writes, he who is affiliated with one of the sheikhs of the tariqah, one of the authorities of the truth, he must know the foundation of his sheikh's way and know the adkar sing dhikr of his sheikh, for the adkar are also often integral parts of the larger Shadhili prayers, known as azab. The third usage of dhikr refers to group recitation of the azab of a brotherhood of Hizb al-Ba and Hizb al-Kabir. Ibn Atta Allah says that he recommends their recital dhikr hamdi in both the desert and the city. Registered. Another important prayer term is word pl-od. Its basic verbal meaning from the root wrd of to appear or to arrive, but in our context as a noun it is usually defined as the time one devotes to supererogatory prayer. But a survey of terms used in the history of Sufi cherub leads to a wider definition. Word may refer to the tariqah or ta'ifa of a sheikh in so far as his central message is to be found in the prayers he has written, or as Hassan el-Budrari points out, the word refers metonymically to the tariqah. Secondly, word may refer to the times appointed for the recitation of a prayer, and subsequently come to mean the actor or the azab, which are used themselves. Finally, word can refer to the ritual order and recitation of prayers as established by the founder of the tariqah. In this way also word may come to refer to the entire tariqah or ta'ifa. In Manbal Sadat we find two od, the word al-Jalala attributed to Abd al-Qadir al-Jilani and the word al-Sahar attributed to Mustafa al-Bakridi, 1709, of the Khalwatiyya. It is interesting to note that the word al-Jalala contains instructions for the reader to recite it 4,356 times and on each occasion to follow it. With 66 repetitions of the Bamala registered agrees a wider study of word as a prayer title would be necessary for us to know whether this type of specific instruction is common. And the word al-Sahar we find an allusion to the word representing the essential message of the tariqah. The prayer begins, praise be to God who had delivered those he has willed to the watering place Moriad, and he has favored the people of Oad above the other worshippers with gifts of generosity. He has granted them divine inspirations whereat which through his sympathy for them are occasions of good fortune. Registered exclamation. A word in its plural form, ordad, often takes on the meaning of religious duties. Al-Shadhili said the ord of the faithful are 20 in number: psalm, fasting, salat, dhikr, tilawah, recitation, censure of the self from craving, enjoining the good, forbidding the evil, tawakkul, trust in God, wara, piety. Degrees included in this discussion of the ord of the tariqah are the requirements that the adept take an active role in the community, which includes marriage and a family, while at the same time avoiding undue attachment to worldly pleasures. Further, the sheikh stresses the personal ethic when he requires his followers to avoid causing offense and bear the insult. Registered. The term wazifa wazifa, often translated as duty or daily office ***, can frequently be found with odd in our manuals. For instance, the story related by al-Shadhili that when a man asked his Sheikh Ibn Mash to prescribe for him wazifa and odd, the master angrily replied, "Am I a prophet? Do I impose obligations? The religious duties are already fixed, and the acts of sinning are known to all. So be faithful to the required duties and reject sin." In this example, if we take odd to mean religious duties in general, then wazifa would refer to the prayers that make up part of those duties. Wazifa is in fact elsewhere used as a prayer title. In spite of the Sheikh's point, the wazifa does not mean only completing religious duties. Degrees. We must recognize that wazifa carries the further notion of personal spiritual direction managed by a guide, hence the adept's request In this sense the prayers, wazifa, that are assigned to an adept hold in part the lesson and secrets that he is to learn. Thus, just as word was at first the prescribed time of prayer, and later came to refer to the prayers themselves, so too does wazifa expand from a duty to recite certain prayers. It comes also to imply their contents. In the introduction to his Kashf al-Asrar, the modern Tariqa writer Mustafa Najar states, know that this is the wazifa of the Sana from the collection of the Order of the Ta'ifa of al-Shadhili, spread through him by his master Ibn Bash. In this statement, Najar is stressing the orthodoxy of the message of the Tariqa by equating it with the Sana, the term wazifa, going beyond prayer and coming to signify the spiritual message of the Tariqa. As a title, the term wazifa can be found in a special appended section of the Nai. Bras al-Akiyah degrees have not been able to find any independent treatment of the term as it is used here, but the members of Sidi Belhasan maintain that they are prayers written by the followers of al-Shadhili and were inspired by the Azab. Hence their titles of wazifa Hizb al-In, a short preface to the wazifa collection, the Nai. Bras al-Akiyah degree states that they are part of the practice of the Kavam al-Makara al-Shadhiliyah of the saint. Another important prayer title is Hizb al-Azab, which has the root meaning of group or band. The term refers not only to prayers, but also to half of a juz or 1/60th of the choir degrees and divisions used primarily to facilitate recitation. Hizb is gen. Irali, the title used for longer prayers, and can mean much the same as word ***. And Wad Mikok Spiller defines Hizb as simply a fraction of the word of an order. That is, the sheikh knows the word, and the followers are given only pieces azab of it. Degrees here word is taken to contain the complete spiritual message of the Tariqa. One of the Shadhili manuals explains the relationship between the two terms thus: know that the truth hajika of a hizb is the word received and used in worship, and its like. In usage, a hizb is a collection of adkar, idea, and requests. All are ranged for recital and memorizing and for seeking shelter from evil and asking for. And if we accept Mikok Spiller's claim that the word holds the secret of the Tariqa, then the statement of this manual implies that this secret is represented in an incomplete form in the Azab. Degrees. Leaving aside the word, the Mafakir al-Aliyah provides a more general description of the Hizb, here stressing its central importance within the Tariqa. Know that the Azab of the Sheikh, may God be pleased with him, are the union between the benefits of knowledge and the way of oneness, and the instruction of the Tariqa and the sign of truth, and the sublime remembrance of God, of his majesty and of his grandeur, and the remembrance of the wretchedness of the self and its vileness. The Azab and their use will be the subject of further discussion. Another prayer title, though less common, is Dawah, literally roll, age rotation. One example we have is entitled The Hizb of Protection for Him Who Seeks Power, by Mahi al-Din ibn al-Rabi, which is also known as the Lofty Dawah. Trade. In a recent study undertaken in Egypt, Earl identifies common dawah as a vocal piece derived from colloquial poetry accompanied by a choral refrain registered, but in the Hizb of Protection, although the meter is kept more strictly than it is in other prayers of the collection, and each line ends in Allah, there is no apparent chorus and the lines are rather long. It is therefore not clear whether dawah here refers to the form of recitation, or whether it may be read simply as station or degree. Unfortunately, I cannot refer to the ritual context because the Shadhiliyah in Tunis, to the best of my knowledge, does not use this hizb. As an aside, it should be noted that at the Sidi Belhasan Zawia there is no singing or playing of instruments. Degrees from the same root comes da'ira, circle, which in the Sufi manuals is a figure of geometric circles usually containing names and Quranic words. It seems these figures are primarily used as talismans. On the other hand, the Gast Gid Singh Gasada in Manba al-Sadat are specifically intended for chanting. The following is from a Q Gasada attributed to al-Bakri. Degrees. By Kali Kolulin Gad Kale San Shah at Ibn, by every friend of God who was faultless. Wa Kali Jalalin Gad Jalan Niruhu, and every sublime one whose light al-Zalma illumined the darkness. By Ashin, by Fashin, by al-Samawati, by throne, by prayer mat, by heavens, by al-Shuli at eye heights, by Ma Kadhala Kelbo al-Muhakiki Min, by what the heart of the inquirer has remained gathered of mercy. Qasida are popularly used on special occasions throughout the year, particularly at Maulid celebrations. Although not the case at Sidi Belhasan, qasidas such as this one may be used as prayer during a Hadra. Copyright. Another form popular prayers can take is that of the hers or amulet. In its smaller form, so hers usually contains no more than a few short extracts from the Quran degrees, but larger collections do exist. One Shadhili collection is entitled hers al-Jawshan, the amulet of the coat of mail, which contains a piece from the dollar degrees Khairat of al-Jazili d. 1465 along with 3 Ozdab in shortened form. Trademark the pose of an amulet is more practical than it is spiritual. Thus, this pocket-sized booklet claims to be particularly useful against the ills that afflict both men and women. It can protect the traveler day and night and will defend its reader from the deceit of liars. Sorcery is thwarted as are the evil intentions of thieves and jinn. It also helps a woman find a husband and can ease her pains during childbirth. All of the above-mentioned prayers exist, some more prominently than others, in written form. Nevertheless, we would do injustice to the subject if we did not push on to examine their animating principle, the recitation. By animation, I mean not only the idea of performing a prayer by reading it, but also the sense of an added spiritual dimension acquired by the prayer when it is recited. Dhikr and Azab. Before turning to the reading of prayers, we would do well to take note of the great recitation, the core degrees in itself. Degrees asterisk. The first point to be made is that the text of the Quran is most effective or most fully realized when it is recited. In fact, the authoritativeness of the Quranic text is only realized in its fullness and perfection when it is correctly recited aloud. In other words, the Book of Holy Writ Kitab in Islam is ultimately not a written or printed document, but a holy reciting or recitation. Exclamation degrees. The second point to make is that from the perspective of an individual worshipper, recitation maximizes one's spiritual interaction with the material at hand. William Graham refers to this spiritual interaction when he writes, meaning is carried by the recitation over and above the particular meaning of the literal passage recited, however deeply felt and understood that meaning may be on an intellectual plane. Degrees. This meaning is available even to those who by virtue of illiteracy or a language barrier do not understand the literal meaning of the Arabic. Degrees. The issue of recitation is relevant to discussion of the Azab, but let us first turn to another important recitation of the names of God, Dhikr Asma Allah. In one of the earliest systematic works written on the theory and practice of Dhikr, Miftah al-Falah wa Misbah al-Aura, written circa 1304, Ibn Atta Allah writes, Dhikr is to free oneself from negligence of forgetfulness by the permanent presence of the heart with God al-Haq. Exclamation registered in this work. Dhikr is divided into 3 categories: that of the tongue verbal, that of the heart, and that of the secret. Dhikr. Ibn Atta Allah writes, invoking the letters of God's name without presence of mind is invocation of the tongue, invoking with presence of mind is invocation of the heart, and invoking with an absence of self-awareness because of absorption in the invoked is the invocation of the self or secret. This is the hidden invocation. Exclamation registered. The Dhikr of the tongue, although only a first step, has practical benefits. For the novice, it is the practice by which he may learn to discipline and focus himself. Ibn Atta Allah suggests Dhikr formulas such as Allah Maya, God is watching me, and Allah Nazaran Ilayya, God is looking at me. Degrees. On the second level, that of the heart Qalb, the Dhikr is internalized. This marks the first stage of extinction of the individual's identity into that of the divine. Exclamation. At the next level, it is by extinction of extinction that one exceeds to direct contemplation of the divine truth. This is the secret Dhikr, where differentiation between the individual and the object of remembrance is lost. Ibn Atta Allah characterizes this level as one in which the lights of revelation do not disappear. In other words, the divine illumination becomes constant. He adds that you may abandon the first 2 Dhikrs, but the third, once attained, will never leave you. Louis Goddard makes the observation that there have been 2 distinct lines or forms of Dhikr. In the older form, it is simply one of the methods of prayer. In this second, beginning with Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, Dhikr comes to represent procedures by which one may attain spiritual states. This observation is essentially accurate as long as it is remembered that Dhikr in the first form did not disappear with the advent of Dhikr in the second form. Our discussion of the various uses of the term Dhikr, particularly in relation to the prayer titles cited earlier, sets out examples of the use of Dhikr in this more primitive sense. The Dhikr of procedures, an essential part of the ritual of a taraka, consists of the recitation of the names of God. Practice varies between brotherhoods and even between sheikhs. For the Shadhili Tarika in general, the ritual event is called a Hadra and usually consists of gasate degrees and an azab recitations in varying there and amounts, which are then followed by the Dhikr Allah. But the Hadra is somewhat different in the case of the Sidi Belhasan Zawia of Tunis. There the primary Dhikr takes place on Saturday morning, prefaced by a short Quranic reciter. The larger Hadra on Thursday night is highlighted by the recitation of the azab rather than the Dhikr. Of the formulas to be used, we know that Ibn Allah recommended that only the words Allah and he be used. He also preferred that Dhikr be carried out in cold retreat, solitude. 5. At Sidi Belhasan, the Dhikr as a group active. It is carried out either at night or in a dark, closed hall. There the Dhikr consists of Allah and Huwa with a few short Quranic verses added from time to time by the Shaykh of the Dhikr. In contrast to the exclusive use of these two words, Ibn Ayyad quoted Abd al-Wahhab al-Sharani d. 1565 saying that /Allah la Allah is the most efficacious Dhikr formula. Registered, it is interesting to note that both Ibn Allah and Abd al-Wahhab al-Sharani recommend that the adept engaged in Dhikr focus on the image of his Shaykh during his recitation. The Dhikr of Sidi Belhasan is carried out by two lines of men standing facing each other. At first Allah is pronounced very slowly and in low tones, so slowly in fact that the name is difficult to say in one breath. The recitation speeds up and the two lines begin alternating in pronouncing the name. This is necessary because one can not properly pronounce the word at the higher speeds. When the recitation reaches an unsustainable speed, the Shaykh of the Dhikr stops it and starts the process again. With Huwa, sessions may last up to an hour and a half. There are in fact two Shaykhs of the Dhikr. One participates in the recitation. He not only controls its speed, but must also call out to those who are bordering on highs to keep them in line, ! While the other stays near the door of the hall and lets the active Shaykh know when he should end the Dhikr. This second Shaykh controls access to the hall. If there are not many people or the participants are not very experienced, the Dhikr will be ended after approximately 45 minutes. At this point the room is relighted and Shaykh Belhasan enters and takes his place at the mihrab of the hall. Remaining in two lines, the men sit and recite the Fatiha a number of times. Shaykh Belhasan says short prayers between the recitations and a common meal of bread, olives and water is served to all with the remains prized for barakah. The azab of al-Shadhili are recited primarily at the communal Hadra. Degrees the sum. Mer season at Sidi Belhasan is the high point for these recitations, attracting hundreds of participants each night. The azab are read in a special cycle. Degrees over the 14 summer weeks. Week 1, Hizb al-Kabir, Hizb al-Dayat, Hizb al-Kabir, Hizb al-Bar, Hizb al-Hamdi and Wazifat, Hizb al-Hamdi, Hizb al-Fath and Wazifat, Hizb al-Fath, Hizb al-Tawashul and Wazifat, Hizb al-Tawashul, Hizb al-Lutf and Wazifat, Hizb al-Lutf, Hizb al-Kabir, Hizb al-Ayat. Week 8, Hizb al-Kabir, Hizb al-Bar, Hizb al-Hamdi, Wazifa, Hizb al-Hamdi, Hizb al-Fath, Hizb al-Tawashul, Hizb al-Lutf, Hizb al-Kabir, Hizb al-Ayat. In addition, the Quran is recited collectively twice in its entirety over the 14-week cycle. The azab are also recited on Friday evenings throughout the year according to a different cycle that, though less attended, includes a greater variety of azab and either. There are also 6 festival days Mawsim in the year in which the azab are recited by the Shadhili Brotherhood, joined by various groups from the other 2 Ruk of Tunis, who are invited to celebrate with them. The Shadhili is renowned for its azab recitation. Let us now turn our attention to the significance of the azab on a spiritual or experiential level. Mention must be made of the important role of the azab, first as the occasion for the religious experience of the individual attained by grasping the spiritual sense of the Shadhili way, and second as the animating experiential element underlying the entire tarika. In other words, recitation of the azab is the practice that provides the individual members with the opportunity to experience the intense feelings that make up the emotional states so often described as ecstatic states. The recitation can send individuals into highly agitated states. I observed men sweating profusely. others crying, and on occasion some with a wide-eyed blank expression who could barely stay seated and recited almost at the top of their voices. This last condition is certainly not pleasing to the Shaykh of the Hadra, although, as with those who are overly expressive in the Dhikr ceremony, it is a common occurrence the feeling being that such a one has only been swept a little overboard. The overly enthusiastic reciter will be gently restrained by his fellows if he becomes too disruptive. In this capacity, the recitation engenders circumstances that are the Tarika's recent detre experience of the divine truth that is at the heart of the Shadhili Tarika. Asterisk the experience available through these prayers is thus the animating principle of the entire brotherhood, because it provides the spiritual message that the Tarika is set up to propagate. Put concisely, this intangible experience, which is reached through the Azab, invests the tangible organization with its deepest purpose, the spiritual reality of the saint's way. Asterisk. The Azab themselves are attributed a status near that of revelation. One reason is that al-Shadhili was inspired in their composition by figures such as the Prophet and al-Qadr. In fact, the saints' knowledge of God, which they have acquired by the taste of actuality, has been divinely imparted to them. For the recitation of the Azdab is thus an important act of spiritual significance, and no one hears one of them without being deeply affected, nor does one read them without a similar result. 5. In commenting on a statement made by al-Shadhili concerning his al-Kabir, whoever recites this litany possesses what I possess and must do what I must do. Ibn Abbad writes, in other words, it is as though the Shaykh was saying, if an individual recites the litany, his al-Kabir with upright intention and sincere hope, and is a lover following our path as embodied in the litany, he has reached the rank of sainthood reserved for me. He has entered into my litany and thus my sponsorship. 76. Thus the message of the Faraka, being contained in the Azab, is essentially of divine inspiration if not origin, and through the rule of the Tarika the seeker may have access to the spiritual reality of the Azab and hence to a divinely inspired truth. Another aspect of the recitation of the Azdab is that in undertaking this activity the individual becomes one of the small special group of Muslims who have, through their practice of the Tarika, placed themselves farther along on the path to God. Are the followers of one of the Awliya friends of God, and they reaffirm this following largely by reciting the unique prayers he has left for them. The power of a saint is available to all who will follow his Tarika. Al-Shadhili himself speaks of the saints as the conduits for divine light directed toward the world. He says in Recitation is the pouring of light upon the essence Jawhar of prophethood, and it spreads from the essence of prophethood to the prophets and the saints, and the lights flow from the saints and the prophets to creation. 8. At the same time, the Tarika as a set of rituals and rules fosters the discipline and tradition that make the Azab recitation both possible and effective. In this way, the rule of the Brotherhood provides the framework in which the Azab are relevant and in which they are perpetuated. Regular contact between the members of all ranks has a subtle yet strong influence on the spiritual evolution of an individual. As for remarks within the network, one learns not only how to act, but how to respond to the realities that make up Sufi life. In the Mafakir al-Aliyah, the importance of this communal interaction is made clear. All this pious activity and spiritual end is not accomplished by you except by keeping company with virtuous brethren, or a proven Shaykh. Degrees. It is from among the brothers of the Tarika that an individual will find his role models, and it is these people who will have the greatest hand in his spiritual development. Relevant to the dynamic of his recitation was discussion of Dhikr, in which he describes the impact that a well-performed Hadra can have. He writes, the Dhikr, when it is said to be good by the participants, takes them out of their collective selves and makes them, in the moment of enthusiastic experience, into a cohesive and vibrant ensemble. This first step toward the intangible is achieved through a corporate effort of communal prayer. Louis notes the importance of the group. All Muslims are convinced that prayers are most effective when completed collectively, and that God attaches particular merit to them. This solidarity in prayer goes far in erasing the personality and individuality of the adept, since he belongs not only to his Shaykh, but even more so to his brothers, all of which promises benefits for him if he remains on the path. 3. Thus, part of the essential message is to be grasped by the individual both as he is subsumed by the group identity and as he is personally directed by the rule of the Tarika. At Sidi Belhasan, the Azdab recitation is very difficult. Not only are the prayers themselves many and rather long, taking years to memorize, but the complex reading technique must also be mastered. Those more accomplished lead the younger and the less dedicated in the recitation, thus training them in proper technique. This technique is vital to keeping the Azdab recitation alive and meaningful for the brothers. It is clear from the above description that much of the significance of the Azdab is functional. They are important texts in large part due to the devotional practices and experience that they represent. Conclusion. From this study of al-Shadhili's legacy, we may conclude that the power of his sanctity is an animating force present in the functioning of both the Zawia complex and the Brotherhood. Further, the Zawia and Brotherhood strengthen each other, each presenting a complementary manifestation of the saint's legacy. Each might survive without the other, but their close relationship is doubtless responsible for much of their success and longevity. Again, they are complementary forms of al-Shadhili's leg. If the saint is present to the Zawia site via his hagiography and popular legends, he is present in the Faraka largely through his Azdab. The role of the Faraka is to provide a structure and a catalyst for the spiritual development of its members. Simplifying matters to make a point, we may equate structure with the adab rule of the Tarika and catalyst with the spiritual authority of the saint. The sanctity and position of the founder and to some extent the subsequent sheikhs were established by his achievements, both miraculous and intellectual. Is this position that allowed the saint to establish a rule and that continues to invest the Tarika with a sense of spiritual authority. Recitation of the prayers of al-Shadhili allows the individual to reassert his devotion to the saint, to reconnect with his spiritual guide. On one level, the individual is part of the group structure, but on another he remains a single devoted follower, murid of the great sheikh. It is largely through the Azdab that this contact is re-established. In fact, they are the message of the Taraka in the sense that to participate fully and experience them is to experience the spiritual truth of the saint. The prayers, in addition to their status as the text of the recorded inspiration of the saint, also serve an immediate ritual function within the practice of the Brotherhood. Both of these elements must be appreciated if the significance of the Azdab is to be understood.